None of us are getting out of this alive. It's an old Irish saying, and it's true. But you want to hang around as long as you can and be as active as you can. So why not protect yourself?
Hey, welcome to All Things Wood Floor, brought to you by Wood Floor Business. I'm your host, Steve Diggins, with Wood Pro, Horizon Forest Products, and Wood Floor Business Magazine. Wood Floor Business for the Wood Floor Brilliant, baby. Today, expert Bob Goldstein, retired wood floor master, blogger, author, from Boca Raton, Florida. In this special episode, Bob's going to share with us his decades of experience as a wood flooring contractor, inspector, and consultant. He talks about how contractors can protect themselves from the severe health risks and shares his own personal struggles resulting from exposure to materials that we all still might work with even today. Bob Goldstein is a hardwood flooring Mount Rushmore kind of floor pro, so with no further delay, All Things Wood Floor welcomes Bob Goldstein, lifelong wood floor expert, Boca Raton, Florida. Floor pros around the world, let's get to it. Bob Goldstein, welcome to All Things Wood Floor.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Hey, I'll tell you, you're in Wood Floor Business Magazine. They got you up on the Mount Rushmore. So this is an honor that you're chatting with me. I know we spoke a couple times on the phone, but I appreciate you taking the time.
It's my pleasure.
Now, you're down in the Hollywood, Florida area or Boca?
Yes, just north of Hollywood. I grew up in Hollywood.
Okay. Hey, gotcha. Yeah, I've got family in Perrine, and my home away from home was Homestead High School football. Because when we went to college, we didn't have a team to root for. So I don't know. We picked that one somehow. It can't be more than an hour from you.
Yeah, Homestead, Thoroughbreds.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, I coached high school football for 20 years. So I know most of the teams.
Did you play too?
Oh, yeah.
Most floor people I talk to, they say that between the sport and the flooring, it wasn't good for your knees. Your knees still holding out for you?
Yeah, after a couple surgeries, they're working okay.
That's how we do it. Bob, tell me a little bit about you and your family, and then let's chat about how you got into flooring.
I don't know where to start about how I got into flooring.
You have 3 children?
I do. I have 3 children. I was a single parent for 20 years, and surprisingly, they all turned out well. Both of my sons are in the wood floor business.
Wow.
And my daughter is a college professor. So
down in Florida?
Here in Florida, yep.
That sounds like they must have kept you busy. Did they start with you when they were early, or they just helping out, and then do they do their own thing now? They have their own floor businesses?
Yeah, they were basically free labor.
Yeah.
And because I was a single parent, the fact that I ran my own business was a huge help because I could take them with me whenever I needed to. And instead of them just standing around, I'd have them clean up the job site, bring tools and back and forth. So they've been a long time. Of course, I'm thankful that my daughter pursued her education. She went to the University of Miami, where
Coral
she was
Gables?
a cheerleader.
Yep.
In Coral Gables. Yep. She was a cheerleader there for several years and for a championship team, which was a lot of fun.
Wow.
And both of my boys, like I said, are in the wood floor business, as was my father. That's how I got into it.
That's so a lot of generations.
3 generations, actually.
Now, Bob, you would remember, we were talking about this the other day. No, my guys don't understand what unnested hardwood flooring is. And
yeah, right.
When we were doing gymnasiums, we put out the 8-footers, the 7s, the 6s, and my kids would just cull and grade and rack them out for my guys, and that they would line them up just like Tinker Toys, and we would stand there and say, "Don't get used to this. Right? You're going to college, and then we could talk about your flooring career." But
I did not want them to necessarily get into the business.
But how did you get started in the business?
I actually started working with my dad when I was a kid, 10, 11, 12 years old, and just went to school to become a teacher. And the year that I would have started teaching in Broward County, the starting salary, I believe, was $6,800 a year.
Wow.
And with, 3 kids to support, that didn't really hack it. So back in the day, there were union shops in South Florida, believe it or not, and that my dad was in local 405. So he got me on as a trainee, and it started from there. And I think it was very advantageous to go through that program, because as an apprentice, you have a lot of training that they put you through. And it's not just specifically in wood flooring. You had to learn many different crafts. You had to learn the Armstrong method of linoleum installation, including pattern and design and pattern scribing.
Yeah.
And if you do vinyl or linoleum, you learn floor prep like no other trade. And that helped so much going forward when I decided to just focus on hardwood flooring. But I did learn the other aspects as well. I could install, at the time it was VAT, vinyl asbestos tile, then it changed to vinyl composition. Did a lot of sheet goods and linoleum, a little bit of carpet and wood flooring. And they noticed I really enjoyed that. So I kind of gravitated toward that. It was like we and I discussed the other day, the first machine I got to use as a helper was a 110 Clark DU8, which was a popular rental machine back in the day.
Tilt ones?
And you just had to tilt it, and it was kind of like you learned to get the feel of how much pressure the drum was putting on the floor. And you either you destroyed the floor or you got it looking pretty good, depending on your skill set and how long you were at it, before they would turn you loose on the real big machines. And in those days, it was Porter cable, 12-inch drum sanders. There were a lot of the original Clark machines out there. American sanders, obviously.
Pro 8, Apollo 8, the big ones before the Galaxies.
Way before the Apollos. But the old 504s and F87s and
that big old motorcycle chain on them, wooden handles.
Yeah.
I always love talking with you because when I first got in, it was probably 85, 6, 7. I had a mentor that had been one of the best in the country anywhere, and they brought him into Armstrong to be like the national training director. And I haven't heard some of the things that he taught me until I started speaking with you. Like you just said, pattern scribe. Somebody at the office the other day did a hearth, and he told me all the intricacies how he did the hearth. They go, "Did you think of pattern scribing it?" He had never heard of it. I think maybe you and I are the only ones that know what that is.
Learning that even came in handy with hardwood flooring, because there were some tricky cuts. I was able to take just paper and scribe in the cut, and then transfer it onto the wood, and using the proper tools, and not trying to hack it in on a table saw, just make absolutely perfect fits.
What did you use for the pattern? What did you use?
Back in the day, it was hydrocord paper.
Okay.
It's the paper that it's the exact same paper that they use on the back of sheet vinyl.
Okay. Yeah.
It's heavy. It stays in place. It's easy to mark up, and it doesn't fall apart when you move it around. You can't find it anymore because it contained asbestos fibers, but that's what we used.
Yeah. What didn't contain us? We're going to get into that too. Yeah. Now, when did this all start, Bob? How long have you been in the industry?
Since making a living at it since 1966.
Okay.
And then I started my own company in 1970 when I left the union.
Install, sand, finish, everything? Just wood?
I just went to install, sand, and finish. Whatever I sold, I did. I hired some employees over the years, and after my boys graduated from high school, as much as I wanted them to continue like their sister did, they really weren't interested. They wanted to learn a trade. So I have to say unequivocally, my son Todd is probably the best installer I've ever seen.
Really?
The most meticulous. Never ever had a complaint on the job that he did, because he was always pickier than any customer we had. And to this day, his reputation is extremely high-end, custom crafted wood floors.
I'll take good over speed any day. Sometimes you need speed, but taking your time.
And it worked out well, because his brother Ron was more interested in the sanding end of it. Mm-hmm. So, Todd did the install, and Ron would do the sanding, and I'd do a little bit of both.
Was this all in Florida the whole time you were in Florida?
Yes. I started the business here.
It's different.
But we did a lot of work. Yep. People have a misconception about wood flooring in Florida.
Yes, they do.
All of the original construction here, going back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, when the Flaglers and the Vanderbilts and all that were building mansions down here, and then they had to build homes for the people that worked for them and people that worked on the railroad, the Flagler Railroad, that one that's, I guess, famous or infamous about the fact that it literally fell apart during a hurricane. It used to go all the way to Key West, but all those homes were hardwood floors. They were pier and beam construction,
right.
And they were predominantly 1.5-inch quarter sawn, and they were just last forever, no issue with acclimation. We had no air conditioning back then.
Right.
The only people who had air conditioning were very wealthy. So your typical single family home had a hardwood floor, and then later when FHA got involved, you had a choice of two. You had terrazzo or hardwood, because the philosophy was the floor should last at least as long as the mortgage.
Right.
And the mortgage was typically 30 years.
Right.
Which is kind of ironic, because in 1966, they approved carpet for FHA. Mm. And now you're putting in carpet that if you're lucky if it lasted 2 or 3 years, and you still had that 30-year mortgage. So for a while, it was really difficult in the hardwood floor business. The only people that were buying wood floors in the mid 60s through the 70s were, again, wealthy people. And then this is about the same time that Bruce started doing a lot of their pre-finished wax floors, if you remember those.
Yes.
And it turned things around because it became more affordable. But our skill set was in, nail down, sand and finish. And of course, you have to roll with the punches and learn. So
still cleat nail in it, or were they using cut nails down there too?
We started with cut nails, just hand nailing. Yeah. That's the way my dad did it. Basically, you'd wear an apron with cut nails in it, and this may sound strange to some people, but they keep a bar of ivory soap in the pouch, and they just pop the nail into the soap and then nail it. And because they were blunt nails with the soap on there, would lubricate it, and you wouldn't split the tongues. And these guys, including my father, could fly. I mean, 22-ounce hammer. Of course, my thumb, I almost destroyed it completely during the learning process. And one of the happier days was when we broke down and bought a couple of Model 45s, yes, cleat nailers, and changed our world.
Yeah, no hose was connected to those things.
No hose, but we all had a right or left forearm, depending on if you're lefty or righty, like arm. Popeye arm. So,
did they do all? I remember hearing about the H block down there, and they would use like hot roofing tar or cold stick or something. Were you in? Right. Did you have to do all that? Was some crazy stuff.
That was mostly in commercial work back in the day, and you use we use a lot of cutback, which is an asphalt-based adhesive that had a lot of asbestos fiber in it that kept it viscous. Right. And what did we know? It was the wood would stick to it, and we had no complaints, and it was fairly easy to use. So we did it. We used a tremendous amount of block. And then the other product that was really popular that I did probably 1 million square feet was paper-faced parquet. Back when it was before Tarkett or any of those people, it was Harris, and we did just hundreds of thousands of square feet in department stores, all their the aisles and furniture departments. We'd get an area, say, well, tonight we're going to work in Burdines, which was a big department store here in South Florida. It's now Macy's. and we'd knock out 5,000-6,000 square feet of that stuff in a night.
I had my Bird Irons card. I think they used Pattern Plus too. Wasn't that the famous one? Acres and acres of Pattern Plus, and which was I think
that was a long time after. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned Pattern Plus. Again, that was a Tibble's product, and we did a lot of Ethan Allen stores with it. And we found out after it was down for a little while, because of the construction, it had those cross-slat boards as the core. It would telegraph the core within 6 weeks, and it looked like there was chatter everywhere.
Wow.
We had nothing but claim after claim after claim, and it turned out it was that type of construction just doesn't work well here in the humid South.
I remember they tried to make some intricate parquets, and some of the companies would hire wood craftsmen, and they would make them so perfect that after a few months they'd just blow out. And then we came up with this rule: if you held it up to the light and light didn't come through, then don't put it in. You need some type of room in there.
The paper face, I don't know if you remember that Harris had patterns, like you could get a Roms pattern.
I have them in my office.
Yeah.
That's how I got into this industry. Yeah. And I'm going to ask you about that. So I have some in my office, and Wally Johnson gave it to me. He's probably 80-something now. He's our guy up here like you. The guy I worked for put it in upside down. He glued it, put the paper down,
I've seen that.
Sanded it. It was blowing. Have you ever seen that one?
Yeah, I have.
What was the right way to put that stuff in?
Right. Well, they had their special adhesive. They had one that had a C on the label, which was for concrete, and one that didn't, and that was for other substrates. So you would just put it in, trowel it in wet, and like you said, all the little fillets in the pattern were loose set intentionally. So you do an area and come back with a sponge and water and wet it all down and peel the paper off. And back in the day, it was put together with horse glue. And it literally smelled like a wet blanket. So you peel that all off and then go back and adjust it to tighten up the patterns and make sure everything were on your chalk lines, and then continue. It was, at the end of the night, you'd have just literally a huge pile of paper that was all sticky, and you get rid of that and go back the next day and start sanding.
You must have seen some products. I know that when I started, they were, like you said, the Bruce products had these ginormous bevels, and you either had light and natural, which was a neutral wax, or you had dark and rich, which was a brown wax.
Right.
And
Gunstock.
That's the one.
That's the one.
To this day, they grade some of the flooring and pre-finished will have a certain grading on the back, which means we're going to make this product with red oak and white oak, and it's going to be Gunstock. So if you're thinking you're sanding red and white oak, you are.
Yeah, there was a lot of mix. Over the years, when we go back and refinish these floors, we'd find out that it was a mix of red and white oak. And if people wanted it natural, after you sanded it, they'd have to make a decision to stain it something. Because it just looked kind of goofy. But it's funny you mentioned that. When they came out with the pre-finished 2 1/4 by 3/4, I don't know if you remember Sterling Strip.
I sold a ton of it.
It was one of the very first ones.
Laurel Strip and Sterling Strip. Yep. It was square edge.
Right. And it was a nice product, but again, it was a mix of red and white, and everything had to be a specific color. And the most popular ones were neutral and Gunstock. And then they had some other, a darker one. I don't remember the name.
Oh, yeah. I remember 926 was Gunstock. Each one, CB 926 was the Laurel Strip version. Then they put it into Home Depot, called it AHS series, and then they shortened the bevel, and the rest was history. But remember, that was everybody always, even the other day, somebody said, well, why don't we have a square edge product? Ask the Bayport people, the Sterling Strip people. Up here, it moves, the edges chip, and then people get upset, and it doesn't perform like a sanded and finished floor at all.
No, it was never the same look. And people who had other rooms that were job site finished, and then you put it in a new floor, something that they chose in the Sterling Strip, and they were, why does it have these gaps and this and that? And, what we know today as overwood, underwood, it was just the nature of the beast. Try to explain that to somebody that owes you
How'd you recondition those? What happened if how did you do those? Did you have to go back in, that one had a urethane, but the ones with the wax, did you have to go back in and wax them and buff them out? And
well, it wasn't as hard as what people think it is, because, if you recall, Duracell had Durafinish and Duraseal, and they had liquid wax that came in those colors.
Duralustr. Yeah.
And then they had like 228 medium brown. Do you remember those?
Yeah, Duralustr 228. Yep.
So you just pour that out and buff it in, kind of like what you do nowadays with oiling a floor.
Right.
So, you just keep buffing it until it disappeared and you had a nice luster to it.
It always looked great. It just had so much that you talk about like the history of flooring when you have FHA finally saying, you can have carpet in a house and we'll approve the loan, and you're saving tens of thousands of dollars. Boom. All of a sudden, people are builders can't wait to get rid of the flooring contractor. They're throwing cheap carpet. But people forgot the memo that said this stuff's only supposed to be 5 years. My parents lived on their carpet for, I think, probably 60.
Yeah, remember, I also recall vividly that in the early 80s, it seems like all we were doing was ripping up carpet and finding a beautiful wood floor under it and fixing them.
Yeah, or with animal urine.
And if the tack strip nails rusted, so you'd go out and you just pull those boards off of the perimeter and go to your local lumber yard and get some 1.5 inches to replace it. And it was amazing how, like, if you here in South Florida, the closer you get to the beach, the higher end the homes are, obviously. Right. So we'd rip up carpet and find these floors with beautiful walnut inlays and cherry inlays. They were all done by hand, right, in the 1940s and 1930s. And we'd sand and finish them and bring them back.
People would cover them.
That's what I love about it. Right? That's where, that's where the passion comes from.
I know people say it's cold. My parents' floors were cold because they probably weren't heating the house because fuel was so high. If you warm a floor, it'll be warm. And that's how we got into radiant heat and everything else today. It's interesting, the changes and the dynamic and what we've been in and putting in and installing and sanding and finishing. When you were working with your dad, was it pretty simple? Red oak, white oak, this, that, and whatever there was at the local lumberyard, or was there a distributor that had a few good things?
We basically did a ton, train loads of red and white oak. Every once in a while, well, here in South Florida, before I was born, they were using a lot of Dade County pine. It's an unusual pine in that it's harder than Brazilian cherry or ipe. It was incredibly hard.
Like longleaf or cypress, like that kind of.
Pardon?
Like longleaf or cypress, that kind of hard?
No, it was just a species that was local to South Florida, and they used it to the point where they decimated. There is no more Dade County pine. Right. When they tear buildings down now and they find Dade County pine, whether it's in beams, flooring, or whatever, they save it for doing repairs on some of these old mansions and older homes. The only thing that you could do in lieu of that, if you can't find any, is to get some really good reddish heart pine that's vertical grain, and it'll match close enough. But it was so hard you couldn't nail it. You'd have to drill holes to get your cleats in it. So,
but you're in an area that's famous for. Have you been over to George Goodwin's place up northern Florida?
Oh yeah.
My sister lives in the same little town because Micanopy is like my favorite. That's my favorite town in America. If you've ever seen Doc Hollywood, which is where they filmed that movie with Michael J. Fox, we go every year. My wife and I take a picture of us in town, and my nephew's wife that he married is a townie, and there's really only like 30 people. She's from Micanopy proper. We call it Grady. Right. I went up and looked at his mill, and he goes over some of the lumber and the axes still in the wood and how hard the heart pine is and the cypress. It's pretty fascinating. They get some beautiful wood coming out of Florida. Yeah,
it's the process of getting that lumber is even more interesting because that's material that sunk in the river during transportation. It's been underwater for probably 100 years. They use sonar with their little boats to find the logs, and then they retrieve them. And that's why it's so expensive. there's a finite amount of it, and getting less and less. But
and those trees are 100 years old to start with.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's interesting. But again, back in the day, that's what it was. Red and white oak. It was all commodity type stuff, and it wasn't until later that we got, we used to do some maple, a little bit of ash, but even in the 80s and up to the late 80s, an exotic was hickory.
Right.
Right. So
hickory and pecan.
Hickory and pecan, and yeah.
When did your father get out of the industry? How long did he stay in it?
He was in the industry for almost 55 years. Wow. And when he moved to Jacksonville, when he was older, he just did, some repair work from some local shops to keep himself busy. Unfortunately, my father passed away relatively young. He was only 64. And I think to this day that some of that was because of, the trade that he was in and the products that he used that were even worse than the stuff that I use. And I would use some really toxic.
Oh, he had lead and asbestos. He had all the bad ones.
Yeah.
Back when it was a good thing, right? Hey, it'll level your paint out.
Yeah. Yeah. Think about that. All the finishes had lead in them.
Yeah.
That we used back in the 60s and 70s. And, between lead and asbestos and, the chemicals that are used to make things like moisture cured urethane, which to this day, they haven't come up with a job site finished urethane that's as durable or as beautiful as moisture cured. But, open the can and, everybody leaves. The canary dies.
Yep.
The cat's passed out. And you're breathing that all day.
This stuff is brutal. We had Fabulon Prime, and that was the end of that. It was just pure alcohol, and some of those older finishes. You imagine they're adding lead to the paint, and they used to say, I remember the commercials, if you got the menthol cigarettes, those are the healthy ones.
Right.
Okay. Well, my dad was a Marine. In his field pack, everybody got cigarettes. Here, chocolate, cigarettes, go to war. Here, smoke up, Johnny.
Yeah, I never smoked because both my parents smoked so much. It just drove me crazy.
Yeah.
I had 5 kids and none of us smoked.
Yeah, there's 7 in our house, and we've probably all snuck off to steal them out of my mom's ashtray, but none of us wound up smokers either. Listen, you got enough going on when you're involved in flooring. So when you got rolling and you took over to do your own thing, what was it like? 1 and 2 guys, 5 guys, 10, 20? How did you build the company up?
Well, early on, it started out with myself and a helper. Who to this day is still a friend. He lives in Tyler, Texas. His name is Robert Poole, and Robert kept me laughing and entertained all the time. And basically, it was the 2 of us. And then it evolved into, at one point, I had like 14 people working for me.
Right.
And they were all employees. I didn't use any subcontractors. Right. I preferred to bring in somebody who was like a finished carpenter or a sheet vinyl mechanic, or and then train them,
right? Because
they were more meticulous and they didn't have habits that needed to be broken. They wanted to learn, and they were not afraid of innovation, especially coming out of another trade that's still in the flooring trades. Right. I always found that the best ones were guys that started out doing sheet vinyl.
Okay. Again,
because the attention to detail with floor prep, and in any of our flooring trades, floor prep is just paramount. With us, it's flat, dry, and clean. But as you know, if there was a tiny little pebble under a piece of sheet vinyl, it looked like Mount McKinley.
Oh, it's funny you say that. I did an install like a week ago. I get dragged into family stuff, and I was squaring up the room, and I looked at the vinyl, and the vinyl was perfect. Absolutely lit. And I'm like, we're following the sheet vinyl. And it actually was in perfect grid. So I knew where my boards were going to end up, where I was going. We followed that. It wound up as an insulation barrier. Boom. It was all set up. All that math to find out the sheet vinyl was perfect.
Yeah, that was huge for a while, using sheet vinyl as a slip sheet for moisture control.
Yeah.
It worked great. And, we would all be looking for off goods seconds, mill trials, because nobody was going to see it.
Nope.
And you didn't want to pay for first quality vinyl. So we would have our resources. And I don't care what the brand was, as long as it was, similar construction. I don't know if you recall brands like GAF, which was General Anodyne and Film Company, when they made sheet vinyl for years. And of course, Congolium, Armstrong. And, most of it nowadays is made offshore. You don't see a lot of local brands anymore.
You mentioned off-goods too, because I remember gypcrete being a popular thing, and us saying, "Listen, you can't put wood on gypcrete." And one of the manufacturers said, "Yeah, but you can put an off-good on there, cut it back, then glue your flooring to that." So you're like, so you were able to actually take that softer gypcrete, get the vinyl to stick to it, then get your engineered flooring and glue it to that. So that there's always more than one way, right?
Yep. Not good if you're a cat, though.
No, I didn't throw the cat in there. I don't get in trouble with anybody. Poor cat. So when you got rolling and that was moving along and you stuck in there, then your kids came in and got going. How big did the company get, and where did you move from that to consulting, or did you do your consulting while you're flooring? What was the evolution once you got rolling?
To be brutally honest, the company got to a point where it got to be ungainly. It got too big. It got to the point where my employees were making considerably more money than I was.
Right.
And I was constantly chasing my tail with, complaints. You get a crew out at 7:30 in the morning and they'd go right to Denny's. Yeah. So they'd end up on the job at 9:30 and the customer's already calling you. And, and these are, my biggest problem was I was too much of a friend and not enough of an authoritarian boss. And I just decided one day, my son Todd and I sat down and said, let's just pick the best guys, just go after better work that pays better, and just stop this trying to, nail down as many floors as we can and have all these issues. And that's what we did.
You just said that. I said to somebody yesterday, it's not lonely at the top, it's crowded at the bottom. But you're right. When you're managing, everybody wants to be the people pleaser, keep everything light. But then they kind of miss out on when you really got to bring a heavy hand down and things have to get done. You'll be coating a floor at 5 and the guys are loading the van and you're saying, I just need 20 minutes and we won't have to come back tomorrow. Let's get a coat on this. Yeah, it's tricky for people to be invested like that, like you're saying.
Yeah, I learned from my father who, he used to say, look, it's better off. Let's take 10 minutes now to organize the truck before we leave the job site, so we don't have a mess and we don't have as much work to do in the morning. Just separate the tools from the trash and spend that time to get it right, and you don't have to do it tomorrow. Don't kick the can down the road.
That's fascinating. Was your father a military man?
Yes, he was in World War II. He's a tank commander in the Army.
You say that, it kind of struck me because I was watching a general a little while ago talking to the troops of one of the special forces, and he started his whole award for the class, a graduation class. He said there was 140, I think 22 graduated, and he said this starts every morning with making your bunk, and he was direct about how the bunk should be made, et cetera, et cetera. He moves on, and by the time he's done, he starts talking about war and brotherhood and in the trenches and all that happens, and he wrapped it up by saying, and when that soldier hasn't slept in 2 days or eaten in 2 days and makes it to home alive, there's his made bunk where he started everything, telling him,
right,
you started out well, now you can retire, and you don't have to, there's no more work for you. Go lay your head down.
It becomes second nature. If you do it again and again and again, it's like, it's like brushing your teeth. I mean, you're walking out the door and you go, whoa, wait a minute, I run back in and you've got to brush your teeth. Just, I love it when my grandsons were younger and they would say, well, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? And why do you have to brush your teeth? Why do you have to comb your hair? I mean, you really technically don't have to, but
it's repetition is the mother of skill, right?
Yeah.
You do something 10,000 times, you become a pro wood floor person.
Yeah.
Why we chose that, I have no idea.
Yeah. One of my favorite sayings that my father taught me was, have the skill to do the job, and do it right before you walk in the door. Don't try to learn how to shave on someone else's beard.
Right.
Right?
I think there's a severe lack of training unless you pack up and get yourself to some type of NWFA program. You're learning on the job.
Exactly. That's what most people learn. You know, for many years, I taught at the Carpenters and Joiners unions up in New York and Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And, that was a great program. But with the exception of the NWFA, there really wasn't much before NOFMA. Mm-hmm. The NOFMA schools, I think they started back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And I was an instructor at those schools as well. But it's all about training, and it's all about wanting to learn a trade. It's almost as if this new generation thinks that it's beneath them, right, to work with their hands. Where there's $100 a week lawyers out there. There's so many lawyers graduating from college. There's no jobs for them, and I know plumbers that make more than a good attorney.
I know a plumber that said his sister got her doctorate. By the time she got her first job, he already had a lake house. He's like 17 apprentice, 18 plumbing. He's moving along, money in the bank. And that poor girl, she finally got into a practice and get going. And you're making money, and you're $350,000 in debt. And the plumber started out with money in his pocket. And yet it's a shame. I work in the D.C. area. We talk about this on a few podcasts, and I'm always amazed how affluent it is. And they'll hire anybody and pay them anything to do anything with physical labor or craftsmanship in their home. And sometimes it looks terrible.
Yeah.
You come up here or down where you are, you fight over who's the best floor guy. You got people up in Boca going over to Cape Coral and working the coastline and back again. And these are not $10 million homes. These are $25 million and up homes. I'd never seen anything like it.
Right. When I was still doing, running the company before I turned it over to my son, Todd, we did quite a few jobs out of town, even out of state. We did jobs in the Hamptons in New York and places like that. But, it just didn't make financial sense after a while. I turned the business over to Todd in 1996. Because I had an offer with Lagler to work for them as a rep. And I had a knee surgery, and I was having back problems and shoulder problems. And, and I was only in my 40s. Our trade is not for wussies. No. It's very hard on your body. So I turned the business over to my son, who's done amazing with it. And, I worked for Lagler as an independent rep for a couple of years. That's how I got into the other side of it, so to speak.
You mentioned earlier Flagler down in Florida probably built most of St. Augustine. I think Flagler College built the University of Tampa, where I went. And you can see, boy, that work is absolutely beautiful. Did you ever get to do any type of flooring work in any of those facilities?
We did a renovation, and it's called the Sterling House in Fort Lauderdale. It was built in the original home was a trading post on the New River, and the Miccosukee and Seminole Indians would come in canoes to this house to trade. And they built this mansion there, and it fell into disrepair. The roof was leaking for years, and it was an eyesore. And a gentleman purchased it, and it's right, literally on Las Olas Boulevard, which is a high dollar neighborhood, within walking distance to the ocean, right next to the Intercoastal Waterway. And we walked to the job, and the original floors were white oak, 2 1/4 by 3/4. They were all hand nailed throughout the entire mansion, and it was a mansion. So we got to work ripping out all the damaged wood and weaving in new wood. And as we're pulling it up, on the back of some of the wood, it was stamped E.L. Bruce.
E.L. Bruce.
Texas. Okay? So talk about an old name in the business. So what was really cool about that is, we ripped it, we ripped out the rotten wood, and we did a lot of weaving, and then we sanded and finished the entire home. And you couldn't tell where the floors that were nailed in like 1900 and what we nailed in this era apart. It was perfect. Name another flooring that you can do that with.
No, matter of fact, E.L. Bruce Company. When
the
market changed, when the whole industry got mothballed during the war, they made ammunition boxes, et cetera, went back into flooring. And then I know there was a lot of price gouging and consumer issues during the war. And that's when the Bruce people said, well, you know what? If we put wax on a floor and finish it, it's no longer a commodity item, and we don't get priced according to the government. We can sell it for whatever we want. Well, they didn't realize they just gave every builder in the country a free pass to try to get rid of their hardwood flooring guy. Remember what a pain that was? The builders were like, I want to get done. I'd like to close. The floors aren't done. We got chemical problems. Now they didn't care. People wonder when I get into flooring why a builder would put that, quote, junk in, because it eliminates the floor guy and his profit. They could put that stuff in. Yeah. That's how it all started.
All about speed.
Yeah. Today it is for some companies.
I've tried checking this out, but my knowledge about engineered flooring, what I've learned, and I don't know if it's 100% correct, but what I heard was the Anderson Company in South Carolina, their job was making plywood for PT boats. And when the war ended, they had an incredible amount of inventory on plywood that they couldn't use. And somebody came up with the idea of making it into flooring and selling it as an engineered floor that would be more stable. And that was the granddaddy, so to speak, of the engineered flooring business.
You're right. There's two problems to that.
That is.
Oh, no, it is, because if you go into a certain city and someone will bring in a piece of wood and I'll say, is that from Beacon Street in Boston? They'll go, yeah, how'd you know? It's 3/8, 2 or 2 1/4 oak with a bunch of brass nails in the top of it, because they had this beautiful idea. Well, if we cut half the board in, we get more yield, and we can put and everything all over the New England buckled and warped. Well, you could take that veneer, stick it onto that plywood. Now you got a stable product. And like you said, there's the invention of the laminate hardwood floor. Remember that word? Yeah, they stole that word from us in the 90s. Yeah, we'd say, I put in laminate. Well, that's gone.
Although, Formica, going back in the days, like in the 50s, everything was Formica.
Yeah.
With all the speckly stuff. And
countertops. Did you do countertops?
Yeah. Who didn't have a Formica top kitchen table with a chrome circumference of some kind of aluminum that was polished, and funky chairs with bright plastic covers on them?
My mentor, Ray Smith, he was sent by his father to the military bases, and they'd say, go to the Brown Ranch with the sawhorse out front, and you put the Formica on the floor, and then take what's left, do the countertops, and put a piece of metal around it. And he told me one day his father called him screaming, you should have been done. And he said, I finished early, Dad. They drove over. Military bases, this one's brown, the third one's brown, the sixth one's brown. He went in the wrong house, put all the stuff in the wrong place that had a sawhorse out front, the whole deal. And all I could think of was, you wrap that crap in metal? That's what goes on the counter? That
actually happened to us. We were doing a housing project with an Anderson product, pre-finished product. And they called up and said, this lot and this block, this house is ready for flooring. So we went in there and did all the prep work, did our grinding and leveling, and installed the whole house. And we got a call a few days later that we did the wrong house.
Oh,
and thank goodness it was the builder that we had you remember faxes? We had a fax with all the information on which house to do. But the people that actually bought that house before it was even out of the ground were just thrilled with their new free floor.
Yeah. Oh, geez. So now
they thought they were getting FHA carpet.
Oh, jeez. Now, are you're retired now? Other than what? What are you? You're just retired? You're playing pickleball, or what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, I was playing pickleball.
Oh, I took a guess.
I was playing a lot of pickleball and I was loving it, but I never really retired per se. I stayed in the industry with doing inspections. Initially, I got certified with the NWFA in 2004 when they started the program, and after that, I got certified with several other entities because going through the union training, I know a little bit about carpet, and I certainly know sheet vinyl, and what I didn't know, I educated myself and went to some classes and caught back up on it. And I stay pretty busy with doing inspections, and I do quite a bit of consulting and technical work for attorneys and insurance companies.
Sure.
So,
did you get a general flooring license for? Because I did that. I wanted to get licensed. We don't have them here. I went to DC and got licensed, but they made me study vinyl. I could literally tell you how to cement a hot tub, grout it, the whole deal. And I failed hardwood flooring. I passed every other trade I've never done. And they were laughing when I came out of that private exam, and I said, this test is ridiculous. How many it's 2020. How many cut nails do I put in? They told me I failed the instructions on how to disconnect the gas stove. I'm like, that shouldn't even be in there. I went back in and passed it.
What does that have to do with flooring?
Yeah,
we have a certificate of competency tests here, yes. and each county has their own tests, and the tests are so different that there's no reciprocity between the counties. Okay. So if you work in Miami-Dade, you have to have their certificate of competency. And for people who don't know, a certificate of competency in hardwood flooring is required here to do that trade, whereas anybody can throw in some sheet goods or do carpet without that certificate. But the reason that hardwood flooring and stone and marble are required is because it's such an expensive product. You screw up somebody's house with hardwood floors throughout, and you don't have insurance or you don't have the wherewithal to fix it financially. That's huge. So the certificate of competency here requires the proper insurance, the proper training, and like you said, the test is ridiculous. And
they're old.
When I took it back, in the late 80s, mid 80s, whatever it was, I actually found some errors in the test and brought it to their attention. So that was fun.
Hey, Wood Floor Pros, this is Kim Walgren, the longtime editor of Wood Floor Business. I am happy to tell you that the Wood Floor Business Truck and Van Contest is back and entries are free. If you have a work vehicle that's extra fabulous in some way, you need to enter. If it has attention-getting exterior graphics, or a tricked-out ultra-organized interior, or if it's unique in some way, there's a category for that. Or, on the other end of the spectrum, if your vehicle is a complete and utter disaster in one way or another, there's a category for that too. Submit your entries to us by April 1st, 2023 at wfbmag.co/TV23enter. That's it for now. Let's get back to Stephen's conversation with longtime wood floor pro and WFB author Bob Goldstein.
Is Florida different? I've heard this, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but that typically contractors square up early, you get paid for your material, and if there's any type of dispute that comes afterward, up here you work, you get nothing, and then you fight about it, and you fight to get paid. Is it different? Do you have to be given a deposit or payments up front with materials, or is it just like everywhere else? It is.
Nobody works in South Florida without a deposit.
Explain that. That's the part.
Right, a deposit. Most of the time it's 50 or 60%. Okay. And then there's a schedule on payment. When this is completed, we get a draw, and then when the job is completed, we get the balance on completion. Because it's there's so many transient people here and snowbirds. If you back in the day, you could just shake hands, and at the end of the job, if you did your job properly, you're going to get paid. And down here, it wasn't so nice. So you learn to, what CYA means, right?
Oh,
yeah. It means cover your assets.
That's what it means.
Exactly. So
It's smart. So many people up here get burned, and then you got to put pressure, take legal action, put liens on properties. At least you're getting your money. Everybody gets paid, and you can discuss the BS afterward. A lot of times, flooring contractors are held up over the littlest, silliest, most ridiculous things. You don't hold 95% of somebody's money over a 2% defect in the floor that can be fixed easily.
yeah, that would never fly here.
No.
Never. And being an inspector is kind of like being a cop, because all we look at are mistakes, right? Or potentially mistakes. And it's scary how much lack of skill there is in folks that are out there supposedly professional doing these jobs. And I see it more in luxury vinyl plank and luxury vinyl tile it's really big right now, because again, it's not real wood, so you don't need a certificate of competency to do it. And there's the guys out there that, yesterday they were, banging in just a 12 by 12 room of carpet, and tomorrow they're doing luxury vinyl, and the next day maybe they're doing a glue down, and they don't know, they wouldn't have a clue which adhesive is the proper one to use. So they go to their supplier and they buy whatever's the cheapest.
Right.
So you see a huge amount of problems with that.
Well, technically, too, LVTs, LVPs, SPCs, and those, although they've gotten better and better, there's now coming across what are the problems. And they always say, oh, it's so easy. No, it's very easy to screw that stuff up. I've been doing some testing recently for a company. Then all the ends, you don't find out till later that they're broken and they're lifting. So they were saying, well, no, we don't have that problem. I know they do. So I actually did a video of a floor I did for my daughter, and it has problems. And then I showed them later how they're all perfectly repaired. And I waited, and they're like, hey, how are you going to tell me how you did that? I'm like, no, you said there's no problem, but I have it. And now they're asking me, and I still haven't showed them how I did it, but it's worked. I got a system. We're going to have a little seminar on it next week. These are things we've got to learn and get in place, because some of these new synthetic floors are fantastic. They look much better than the old laminates, and they serve a purpose until you can afford a good floor.
Yeah, we have a lot of issues with them here. Is we don't have basements. If you dig a hole here, you have a pool, not a basement.
Yeah, right.
So you know what it's like. Dig 16 inches and you hit water. So everything is slab on grade pretty much.
Yeah.
In the old days it was pier and beam, but those have issues as well in a hurricane.
Right.
They had a tendency to blow away.
They built a canal from Jacksonville over to Gainesville. Florida could drift off to Cuba. There's not a lot underneath that place.
Exactly. It's funny because, just north of here, the I-4 corridor and north, you're still allowed to build with what's called, what you call stick construction, 2x4, yeah. OSB and all that. Here in below that corridor, it's all CBS block. Yeah, for obvious reasons. But my point is that these floors that are quote unquote waterproof, that is such a load of baloney. I see these floors every day that are end peaking. And if you read the directions, they say you don't need to do any moisture testing. You don't need any kind of a vapor barrier. And they just fail left and right. And of course, the first thing the manufacturer wants to do is point fingers at the installer. For instance, on most of the LVP, the spec on the slab being flat is 1/8 of an inch in a 10-foot radius.
Right.
And they go back, and they put a straight edge on the floor after it's installed. Well, you can't tell what's going on with what's under that floor once it's over the floor, right? It's just a joke.
What's your favorite part of all that you've done in the wood flooring? What's your favorite part of it?
Well, one of the things that made me passionate about wood as opposed to other types of flooring is the longevity, and I'm talking real wood, nailed down, job site finished. There's the three oldest floors in the history of humanity are dirt, stone, and wood, right?
Yes.
And what else can you put down where 25 years later, that customer might call you back and say, my floor needs some maintenance.
Sure.
If they wait that long, it's a sand and finish job for you. Or if they're smart enough to call and say, I've got some wear areas, and you do a buff and recoat, but it's the creativity of it. When you can suggest to someone, for just a couple bucks more, I can put a beautiful border in your den of another species, and you draw up a little picture. And if you've got a track saw, or back in the day, if you knew how the method of using their skill saw to do it, not only is it fun, but it's creative, and it's something that's going to be there long after I'm gone.
You said dirt, right? And I talk about that at some of the seminars that I do. So my daughter recently got married, and I'm thinking, well, you carry the bride over the threshold. We sell thresholds. What's a threshold? I kind of did a little research on it. If you had a dirt floor, the next floor was hay. They threw hay on that to keep the dirt off the floor.
Which is called thresh.
Thresh, and it would scoot out the front door. So they would put a board to hold the thresh, which was usually over an inch thick. So you don't want to trip over it. So you pick up your bride, you carry her over onto the thresh. That's the threshold. And that's where it all started. Right. And then
that's right.
Yeah, that became wood and wood floors. And sawyers knew how to make, when pilgrims came here or whoever, those sawyers, those ship makers, they knew why to quarter material and make pit saws and use white oak instead of red oak. And somehow that technology gets lost down the road when someone gets into woodworking. They say, I'll just make it out of wood, make a boat, make a red oak boat. Good luck with that one.
And then here in Florida, you'd learn that if there were issues, we always had issues with moisture, and do a lot of work down in the Florida Keys. We would never install anything but quarter sawn material down there, even because they say, we have the air conditioning on all year long. Well, when a hurricane comes through, you're not. So, there's a lot of folks in the industry that still don't know the reasoning behind that. What's the difference between rift and quartered or just quartered and plain sawn, and how it reacts to moisture. And I find that fascinating. And if you're doing design type work, it's really smart to use quarter sawn material, and because you're encapsulating the center of the floor with a border and an apron and things like that. So where's it going to go? People talk, manufacturers say, make sure you leave that 3/4 of an inch expansion around the entire room. Well, when you put down nail down a 800 square feet of whatever on a diagonal, and then you cut it all out and border it, the border, there's no 3/4 gap between it and the border and then the apron, right?
Right. So
to alleviate problems, you have to know a little bit about wood science. Whether if you really know what you're doing, you're going to use quartered or rift sawn. And if you can't, for whatever reason, you know about leaving field spacing. Sure. Back in the day, we used to use washers
every 5 feet.
Yeah, washers. And somebody came up with using weed whacker string.
Yeah,
and just pull it out. But then measuring it and knowing how many of these field spaces you have to leave, so it'll close up and not just leave a gap, that didn't close up, then you've got another problem. So the more you learn, the easier it becomes.
I think I would see these commercials these whiskey commercials, and they'll say, our beautiful amber, bourbon or whatever. Well, you got a white oak barrel that you just burnt with a torch, and you got tannic acid. What do you think color it's going to turn? I've never seen anything in a white oak barrel that stayed clear. And the smoky flavor and the whatever it is. I have a quote from you from an article that you wrote that's going to give us this third and last section of what we're talking about today. And I want you to comment on this. This is from Wood Floor Business Magazine. And you wrote, "The hell with old school thinking. Slowly killing yourself doesn't make you tough or strong. It proves you're either stupid or subconsciously suicidal." Let's talk about that.
Right. Well, if you've been in this business long enough, you're going to have a friend at some point that's going to get cancer. Yeah. And if you do the research, you'll find out that it was a direct result of what they did, the products that they used to ply their trade. Whether it was the chlorinated solvents and the adhesives, the moisture cured and acid cured with no safety precautions. People don't realize when you're using moisture cured, what you can literally stand back and see the vapors coming off of it. Literally see the vapors coming off of it. So if you're using it, you should have a full face respirator with fresh apparatus on it. Don't use the same charcoal cartridges. Use those full face, wear long sleeve, long pants. You can absorb these chemicals through your eyeballs, through your skin. There's a reason that they tell you to remove pets and plants. You're better than the Orkin man, but by the time you do a whole house with moisture cured or acid cured, there isn't going to be a live bug in the house.
Yeah, how many people tell you they're proud of that the fumes were so heavy? And that is ridiculous.
I remember doing jobs where I literally had to go out and lay down in the front yard before I felt confident to drive home.
I worked as a young kid in a hardware/industrial center, and one of our retiree that worked up in the hardware section, some guy was painting his car in his garage, and he asked for a respirator, and the guy sold him dust masks. The man barely lived. We were sued for millions, and I was new out of college, and they said, "Kid, we want you to study," and there was no internet, "go study respirators, masks, B cartridges, C cartridges, find out what we need because we have to sell these things, and then we need to educate everybody." That's how I started. And when I started doing flooring, people thought I was crazy because I had my 3M, dual cartridge Type C respirator, and they were like, "Oh, we've been sniffing this stuff for years. It's the greatest." But everything I had been through said, don't mess with this. You personally, listen, I was lucky to work with and meet Bill Price and Roy Reichow, but they're friends of yours. Can you tell me, did that all, them passing, come from chemicals with hardwood flooring specifically?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Bill had cancer in his nasal passages. Everybody out there that's been in this trade for a while knows someone, or knows without actually knowing what killed them, that being in the trade is what exacerbated it. Yeah. Everybody, especially the younger folks, they think, that they're impervious to this. It couldn't happen. It's not going to happen to me. I'm strong and I'm this and I'm that. It's cumulative, like smoking cigarettes. That first cigarette isn't going to give you lung cancer, but that 100,000th cigarette is going to kill you. And even wood dust, as we know, wood dust is a carcinogen. And you're breathing it in, at the end of the day, you see guys out there blowing their nose, and they could make a small log out of what's trapped in their nose, crying out loud.
And that's the stuff that get past the dust mask that they didn't know to press against their nose and just left it wide open.
And if you try to tell them the pain that they may have to go through in the future because of this, because they didn't listen, or maybe they just didn't know better, it's boo-hoo. Well, it's not so boo-hoo when you just had when you had radiation therapy to the point where it's destroyed your gut, and you're home at night throwing up, and you have to put a PICC line in so they can give you chemicals in the morning and radiation in the afternoon. It's not fun.
You mentioned too in what you wrote that you're also, don't forget, this is your family watching you suffer. This could be your family watching you pass away, grandkids missing weddings, babies being born, everything. I worked with someone recently, and we were using alcohol-based sealer, and he was bragging that they do it all the time. I went and bought a $60 respirator because I don't do floors that often, and I went in the house, I walked out, put the thing on. I couldn't breathe that stuff. It was brutal. It was almost like drinking on the job. It was absolutely terrible. And I thought, brutal. He's a young guy. Like, you're crazy. You have kids at home. You really shouldn't be doing this.
Like, one of the mixture of moisture cured urethane, one of the solvents is xylene. To this day, I can smell xylene 2 miles away.
Right.
My neighbor just had a new driveway put in, and they sealed it with a paver sealer, and I could smell that xylene in my backyard across the street. I'm so sensitive to it.
We used to clean our brushes with xylene.
Yeah.
And turpentine because it was cleaner than mineral spirits. But you've had your own health. Are the things that you've gone through with your health, is that definitively from everything you've done with our industry that you were exposed to?
Yes. Well, again, it's hard on your body. I was always an athlete. I always stayed in shape, but I've had 1 knee surgery, 5 back surgeries. I got more metal in my back than a freaking Sherman tank, and you get used to the pain to a certain degree, but you never get used to it entirely.
Right.
And it changes the way you do everything. And as you get older, it doesn't get any better. So what can you do? What about, like, before you play sports? What do? You stretch, right?
Right.
So do the same thing before you jump on that edge or pick up that nail, or stretch out your hamstring, stretch out your back, stay limber. Give yourself breaks and hydrate all day long. Hydrate, stay limber, and don't let it get to the point where your spine is bone on bone and your knees are shot or your shoulders completely worn out. Have you ever, just for giggles, do the math and figure out how many cleats are in just 1,000 square feet of flooring? Let's say that you're nailing on 16 inches on center. So you're putting a cleat every 8 inches, and then one is close to each end match as you can get it. You're swinging that mallet thousands of times. So why not stretch out those shoulder muscles? Keep them limber, keep them strong, give yourself a break. Don't be a hero. Use pneumatics if when you've got them, and it'll change your life for the future. You'll be able to go out and play pickleball without falling down in the court and screaming in agony, and embarrassing the hell out of yourself. And it affects everything in your body. It's not fun. It's they call these your golden years. Well, if you didn't take care of yourself and your trade literally made it worse, they're not so golden.
Not so golden.
Not that I'm complaining other people have it worse. I'm, thankful that I'm as spry as I am at my age, but I did a lot of things wrong.
You brought up a really good point in the piece that you had in Wood Floor Business recently too. And listen, I didn't think about it because I was looking in the opposite direction, and I thought this was pretty wise. So the industry changed the VOC laws, and people will call and I'll say, well, listen, what failed? Did you buy a gallon? They say, yes. I go, that's your problem. And they go, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. I go, well, it's a 250 deck varnish, whatever it is, and you probably have the wrong chemistry. And so you look to find a really good 550 stain and a good 550 poly, and everybody's dumping quarts in 5-gallon pails. And that's fine, and it works beautiful, but I never thought about it till I read your article, and you said, sure, they're getting the chemistry that kills us out of our hands, and we're rushing back to find as much of it as we can. I never thought of that.
Yeah, and we were talking about manufacturers and their responsibility a little while ago. I'm not going to name any names, but there's a manufacturer, when this law was first put out about buying quartz, where they made little quart sacks that they put in a 5-gallon pail until it equaled 5 gallons of finish, and then they could sell it in a 5-gallon pail, and there would be 5 gallons of the high VOC finish in there,
right.
And they got away with it for a while.
Right.
And, people say, well, you're a green weenie, or you're a tree hugger, or you're this or that and the other thing. No, I'm just adverse to significant pain.
Right. Would I want my grandkids doing flooring if they were, working without a dust mask and mixing with thinners and stains with their raw hands, because people love to put it down on the floor with a cotton rag and then breathe, 550 plus VOC material. And, you said it. I remember driving away from a job in my pickup truck and 30 miles up the road, breathing and feeling it. It was still in my lungs, even with a respirator.
Go home and take a shower and you still taste it.
Yeah.
Here's an analogy.
Okay.
How many welders do you know that would weld without wearing a protective mask?
Zero.
To protect their eyes? And with us, it's cumulative over time. If a welder was dumb enough not to wear the face shield, he'd be blind after one or two attempts at it, right? Yep. The instantaneous harm to him. We don't see it because it's just a buildup, Lego on Lego, brick on brick over time, until it hits a point in time where you go to your doctor, you're not feeling well, and they diagnose you with cancer or something like COPD. There's a lot of variations out there. Not to mention what it does to your skeleton. I'm not trying to scare anybody away from doing the
No, but
trade.
this is really good to talk about because the newer generation coming through, and there's not that many of them, are getting 5 times what we got paid, and it looks like a lot of money. Okay, get out there, learn your trade in that, but you are taking risks with this type of chemistry and woodworking and wood dust, and it's right there. And I'm the first person to go in and 4 hours later realize I never put my knee pads on. You dive right into the job, your head now you're in there. And now you're limping and you tore some cartilage and you're like, boy, the knee pads are 100 yards away in my truck. What was I thinking? Or I just want to get this coated and you breathe it.
Yeah. I rarely wore knee pads. I felt they kind of slowed me down, and everything was about, doing it right, but doing it fast. You got to make a living. And my knees looked like elephant hide.
Yeah.
But ask how many guys like me that didn't wear knee pads that got a staph infection from time to time from a splinter. I mean, that's not fun either, and that's happened. You end up in the hospital with a knee blown up like a balloon, and they have to drain it and put you on antibiotics for a couple of weeks. So it's just self-inflicted pain that's unnecessary.
I had a friend from Europe. He was Ukrainian, and his whole family does flooring. And one day they said he's gone. He's younger than me. I said, what happened? They said he had good pasture syndrome. I said, what is that? They go, it's very rare, but if you're a woodworker, like a flooring person, it's genetically found in male Europeans. If they get exposed to dust and certain chemicals, it'll attack their lungs and their kidney. You can get it from viral infection, smoking, certain medications, but the biggest cause is wood dust and chemicals. And
right.
when it affected him and it kicked in, he didn't have 3 days. I had never heard of that. That's how much you're risking playing with this stuff. You and I have been around long enough to see some of the most brilliant people we have ever known suffer themselves, their families, go through this and not pull through it. And that, we sound like we're old and crusty, but hey, kids, stay away from this stuff. Do everything you can to protect yourself. There's no doubt about it. You have a chance in the wood flooring industry not to just work with other people. You have a chance to build colleagues, the Roy Reichhows, the Bill Prices, yourself, people that you look up to, you admire, that this industry put our kids through college and our grandkids and put food on our table and did really well for us, and we love doing it. Well, if we're going to continue, let's be safe about it.
Right, exactly. I have 7 beautiful grandchildren, and I want to be there when they have those milestones in their life, and they graduate from college and do their first piano recital, and none of us are getting out of this alive. It's an old Irish saying, and It's true. But you want to hang around as long as you can and be as active as you can. So why not protect yourself? Why not?
Boy, the Irish really have a way with death, don't they? My dad used to read the obituaries. He called it the Irish sports page. Just to see who moved here from the mothership that didn't make it. It's just crazy. Yeah, I used to say when I'm done with flooring, I just want to run some down and outs with the grandkids at the family picnic. And now I tease you about pickleball because a few years ago I'm one of the few guys around that does gymnasiums and lines courts, and all I've been doing is pickleball courts. I don't even know what it is, and I play tennis, and I just finally saw somebody playing. I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. I love it.
I used to play tennis and racquetball, paddleball, and picking up pickleball was like easy peasy.
Yeah.
And you don't have to run that much, and you see a lot of your contemporaries. I play on a court with people that are similar to my age, but not necessarily. So I played against teenagers and stuff like that. It's more strategy than brute strength or speed, but it's still like to be able to move, right?
I
get out there and play a little bit.
I want to do something with you. Wood Floor Business Magazine sets up 3 or 4 or 5 rapid fire questions. I screw them up every time. They're supposed to be very close to a one-word answer, bang, 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 and we're out of here. And I usually wind up talking another half hour about them. I'm going to give you these quick fire questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
What's your biggest pet peeve in hardwood flooring? What pisses you off?
Stupid people.
If you weren't in the wood flooring industry, what would you have been doing?
I'd be a teacher.
Who's someone in the industry that maybe you haven't met or you'd like to meet?
I've met him, but I didn't have a chance to get to know him. As Gene Klotz. I worked with him at an advanced school years ago.
And with you being partial retirement, not in the day-to-day sand finish grinding, do you miss it?
I do.
Tell me the truth. I can see where you're living. I can hear the dogs. You got carpet in that place? How much carpet you got in that place?
None. Zero.
Good for you. That's the right answer, Robert. Well, thank you a million times. You know, with me joining in with Wood Floor Business, I've had the opportunity to meet the best of the best of the best, and you're up there on that Mount Rushmore with all of them. So it's good to finally sit down and have a chat. You and I super appreciate your time and you.
It's my pleasure. I hope to see you in Milwaukee.
I'm going. I'm going to find a way to go. Can I bring my wife?
I'm planning on it. If the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise, I'll be there.
They got karaoke? I'm going. I'll be there. All right. Bob Goldstein, thank you very, very, very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Again, my pleasure.
Take care of yourself. We will talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of All Things Wood Floor with host Stephen Diggins and wood floor legend and popular wood floor business author Bob Goldstein. If you did, make sure to subscribe and review this podcast. And to find Bob's articles in wood floor business on topics from electricity for wood floor pros to how to recoat a wood floor, go to woodfloorbusiness.com and enter Bob Goldstein into the search bar. Thanks for listening.